Hello, my name is Chris Schnee. I write science fiction and fantasy. Tonight, I'm trying to make some plans for a new fantasy story that I'm trying to write. I have a basic idea so far of what I want to come up with, but I don't have many details yet. So I thought I'd share a little bit of the creative process here, because I'm going to do it in a somewhat unusual way that might help inspire some of you as well. Here we go. Within science fiction and fantasy, there is a subgenre called LitRPG or game lit. This is something about a situation where characters are playing a video game or they are pulled into a fantasy world that happens to operate with the logic of a game. That can be played for laughs or taken more seriously, depending on how much you explore the logic of it. It could be something as simple as people gaining spells, but the spells show up in the form of a interface where they have to mash buttons and spend experience points to choose what spells to learn. That can be fun for a lot of people, and it's a popular genre right now on Amazon and other sources. So I'm interested in doing something similar to that. If you know my existing work in the Thousand Tales science fiction series, I have tended to focus on how a game world interacts with the real world. But I'm going in a different direction this time. I'm going to focus on characters who are in a world that works similar to a game, and focus pretty much exclusively on that and on its own internal logic. And I'm going to do that by borrowing from a different subgenre called isekai, which is a Japanese term for what we've already seen in literature like A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, or The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in which a character is pulled into another world or another era and is there as a stranger who becomes a hero of some kind. So putting it together, we're doing a story where somebody is pulled into a fantasy world that runs on game logic, and that's a person from our world, our era, interacting with whatever the sensibilities and culture are of this other world. One other thing I've decided about this setting is that there are explicit character classes on everyone. So you can call up a glowing interface window and it will announce to the world that you are a fighter, you are a wizard, you are a thief. You may not want to be found out about having that last one. In fact, something else I'd like to see here is that most of the population has the farmer class. Why is that? Well, most people need to be farmers, but there are also governments trying to enforce that by going around to every little village and making sure that that idealistic young farm boy you might find is not secretly taking classes in wizard on the sly. He's got to be a farmer and nothing else. So that's a source of tension and problems in this society. And finally, there is some sort of steampunk technology that is just starting to emerge in this world because for the first time ever, people have started to get it an engineer class. And that allows you to do things like refining unusual materials like special crystals and do things that might allow you to build airships or other cool technology. So the hero is showing up in this world just at the cusp of this new age of technology and is sort of locked into a rigid class system that's going to affect what is going to be possible here and what he can do. Naturally, he's going to be a hero, and he's going to be especially important, but I don't know exactly what he's going to do other than get involved in trying to build cool magic technology. And I don't know much about the context of the setting yet, so I want to make some stuff up and see if I can find some cool ideas to play off of for a setting. I can do some of that with cards, dice, and role-playing game systems. I've used that to some success before with a fantasy series called Godbound to help me decide what happens. My first step here is going to be a game called Mystic Empyrean, which allows you to design your own settings with random die rolls that give you some inspiration. Our first stop over there is a chart for terrain traits. I'm going to roll a random die here and get a 5, which tells me swamp, darkness. There is a swamp in this area, which has a humid canopy of air and trees, small islands. Towns are built on stilts to stand above the muck or float upon boats, creating a mobile community with changing geography. The swamp is beautiful and filled with dangerous creatures like snakes and alligators, sort of like Florida. So that's a possible inspiration for part of our setting. We won't necessarily use this element, but it might be a location that the hero visits or part of his hometown. I'm going to skip this game's page for technology because I've already got some sense of it being sort of a steampunk thing. Its next page is about government traits. I roll another die and get a 3, which tells me theocracy, light theme. Ruled by the divine, the citizens answer to priests who supposedly answer to the great spirits. The particular details of the religion in this RPG aren't relevant to me, but we still get the general idea that it's some kind of theocracy with priests and gods and sacrifices. So that's a possible inspiration to use. I'll now roll a die for their wildlife traits and get another 3. It says something about aberrant, electricity. So this says here we have aberrant creatures that are touched by the corrupting influence of Aether, which is a mysterious magic power in that setting. And they have twisted and impossible powers and a cruel impulse to destroy any creature of anima, the player characters in that game. Okay, so we have possibly giant monsters that are wielding strange powers and are dangerous. Now tell me something about the culture traits here. I roll an 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. That doesn't apply on the 7-item chart. Roll that again and get a 6. And it says something about ascetic, darkness. Ascetic cultures value peace, meditation, introspection, with strong religious tradition, and permissive of new ideas, but not necessarily new ways of life. Content to be left alone if they are not bothered. So looking at that in the context of the theocracy religion, we might say that this is a monastic or vaguely Zen-like religion, possibly. Maybe since we have a cultivation theme going on here, that people are encouraged to meditate and develop their class powers. That's one possible thing we might do. And what else do we have in this cookbook here? We have a society traits page. That gives me a 4, which says nomadic, water. Wandering tribes that set up and break down their cities as they travel across the realm, normally very decentralized, but they work together to fight and survive. Okay. We might use this in the context of a swamp to say that they're a culture that travels through the swamplands and tends not to settle down very much. I'm not sure if this is going to work for a society that's doing steampunk type stuff, but it's a possibility. And there's a page for a creed, which is giving me a rational electricity thing. Rational civilizations rely on knowledge, reason, and empirical observation. Okay, so we've got a theocracy that is also rational and reason-based. Okay, that's a little unusual, but maybe. So putting that together, we've got the swamp, the theocracy, big weird aberrant creatures, an ascetic culture, nomadic lifestyle, and possibly a intellectual type of religion. So this game system has let me roll some stuff up out of context of the actual setting that game uses and put together something that might be a coherent world. I'm also going to take one other aspect of how they describe these settings, because I mentioned elements in some of these, like electricity or darkness. And just as inspiration, I noticed that we have 2 elements with electricity, 1 with water, 2 with darkness, and 1 with light. We don't have anything with stone, fire, or air, which are the other 3 elements of this system of 7 elements. So kind of imagining how these elements go together, we could think of a setting that is dark and watery, and it's got this odd electrical technology that's going on there as well, with beams of light coming through the swamp from above. And it's not very rocky, it's not very airy or very fiery as well. So a wet, damp, cold place and lit by electricity and steampunk technology. So like a really swampy London or Florida or something like that. That could be interesting. When I started out with this exercise, I kind of was picturing a generic medieval-ish stone city with lots of airships in the sky. And we could get to something like that, but what I just threw together with random die rolls is kind of cool, and it's different than what I expected. While we're looking at this RPG book, I am also looking at a table called Sample Places of Wonder that's in this book, and I wonder what I'll roll. I got a 33, which on this chart says a peculiar forest. Another location is invalid roll, and a prison complex. Okay, and give me one more. Yeah, something valid. A temple. So we have a temple, a prison complex, and a peculiar forest. I don't know if I can use these, but they might be interesting. A table for sample trade goods and items gives me spell books and rare food. Okay, that could be interesting. Then we have creatures and monsters. I rolled up dragons. I don't know if I want dragons in this setting. And 14, which is elementals. Okay, maybe. I'm not so thrilled with this result here. Go on to sample cultural events, and I see a 19, which is an interpretive dance. Okay, and a 45, which is storytelling, and give me one more. 46, strange fashion. Okay, so we have strange fashion, interpretive dance, and storytelling. I'm now going to look at a system called Godbound. This is also available as a free preview edition that contains most of the rules. It's sort of a discount version of Exalted, which is something that I've bored people talking about online at length because I think that setting is really cool. Godbound is more of its own setting that involves demigods with amazing powers. I also ripped that off fairly obviously for Wavebound, and I use that to help me decide some of the things that went on in there. I'm using a table called Temple Quartz there. We talked about a theocratic religion in this setting, and I'm going to roll a few dice to get some ideas about a possible temple structure for the religion we're seeing in this setting. Temple Mood says, vengeful, furious against enemies or rivals. A major actor here is a magically gifted priest who controls a vital relic of the faith. Dice, tell me now about a minor actor in this religion. A 7 gives me an instructor priest who, 11, knows a wealth of secrets and confessions. So some sort of teacher who has taught some important people and learned a lot from them, perhaps. We're going to roll a die on another table that we got here for internal conflicts of religion. It may or may not override the vengeful thing we've already got. I got a 9 on this chart, which says they are performing a dangerous magic rite. If this church were to collapse, a curse will fall upon the desecrators. And the temple has defenses, which involve noble patrons. I did this one way back already, but that's a different role. It has powerful defensive relics. Okay, and we know that there's a defensive relic in the hands of this mighty priest. And if you are familiar with Wavebound, that might be instructive here. I really did roll up some stuff on this table to give me some inspiration for what was going on in the city-state of Averell there, where they had a religion that had some priestly defenders and noble patrons. It was similar to that to what I rolled just now, but I ended up not using all those details. It became just inspiration for what was going on. I had similarly rolled up something that suggested that there were foreign soldiers in the city for some reason, and I was not sure why that was going on. I had them messing around with the hero in part 1 of that series, and then that became a major plot point later on. So I didn't use exactly all the details I rolled up at the time, like the identities of particular priests that I was rolling on that table, but I used those as inspiration, and I might end up doing that here, where it may not be exactly what I just described. And for now, I want to do one more thing with Godbound, which is creating a ruin. There are a lot of interesting tables here for several kinds of interesting ruins your PCs can get into in an RPG format. I'm just going to use it for storytelling here. I know, for instance, that the original purpose of a ruin is it was a prison for a supernatural entity. Okay, I've done that one in Wavebound, so it's something else. It is magical or high-tech transport nexus. Okay, I might use that. Let me roll one more value on this table. Transport Nexus, or a gatehouse for what they're calling a night row, which is a place to another dimension. The same idea of a transport facility. One other role on the table is a refuge for survivors of a past disaster. Okay, I don't know, but we got the general idea of a transport network or a gatehouse for something, maybe a prison. I also have a table here for hazards of a ruin. A rule of 16 gives me a taboo wardens, which is described here as it's simply been forbidden, and there are people who have been appointed to guard the site against intruders. Okay, and the reward of the ruin, for anyone delving it, is wrong kind of die, or material wealth in coin, gems, or rare substances. Okay, well, looting a ruin for treasure is always good, but I want kind of a steampunk inventor hero here, so he might be going after it for rare substances of some kind that he needs for crafting. There's also an idea of a different type of dungeon in this game called a Shard of Heaven. I'm going to roll on this table and see what happens as well. It's giving me a sea, golden with diluted suns. It was once magnificent in a particular way, artistry, everything masterfully made. It has fallen into decay, and it has intermittence, the glory skipping time. So we have the idea of an impressive sea of golden light that is beautiful and finely crafted in some way, but it seems to skip as though there's an illusion that's cutting in and out. Okay, so that could be cool. And if there are inhabitants here, they are wretched misfortunates who wandered in by a night road, another dimensional portal thing. And what they wanted here was they're hiding from something worse than they are. So we could have refugees who are hiding out in this mysterious golden sun sea with an enchantment on it. And I'm going to play with one more tool tonight, the Game Master's Apprentice, which is a set of physical cards, also available as digital images by Larcenous Designs, aka Nathan Rockwood. These cards have a lot of information on them. It's a little tough to interpret until you understand what you're doing, but these are a substitute for dice, and they have a lot of sensory prompts and other ideas to spark some imagination. I've written a little program in the Unity game engine for fun to automatically deal some cards, and that happens to be a way to easily generate some images to show you here. So I'm going to play with that a bit and see what it gives me. One of the most basic things you can do with these cards is to look at the little icons that appear in the little wheel of dice in the upper right. In this case, I have a spread of 3 cards, and we have what looks like a glowing book, maybe, a swamp, and I'm not sure what that is, an orc head or similar. Okay, so we've got a theme of maybe a magic book and the swamp that we've already seen, and some kind of humanoid or hostile guard or something like that. There's some element icons in the upper right as well, showing a water drop for water, another water, and fire. Okay. Another inspiration here is take that set of 3 words below the bad, even good part, and read the first word of the first card, second word of the second card, third word of the third card, and so on, to get 3 three-word phrases that are scrambled between the cards. So here, for instance, we have restore, unfair, treasure. What could that mean? Then we can start with the first word of the second card, and so on, and we can get 2 more phrases. Execute, scientific, foe, and decrease, physical, resource. Okay, what do all these mean together? Restore unfair treasure could be something like taking back something that was stolen. Execute a scientific foe is fairly straightforward, that there's some evil rival that is being hunted down for his wicked scientific ways and executed. Decrease a physical resource. There's a shortage of something important and someone has to go find a new source. Throwing that together with the idea of the spell book and the swamp and the orc guy, you could have something that is needed for magic is in short supply and someone is after it. I'm kind of thinking a little about making paper from swamp materials, but they would probably have papyrus or something like that if they wanted to make paper. Not sure what to do with that. We can look at a few of the sensory prompts there, like heart-rending shrieks or impish maniacal giggling. And see if any of these are relevant. I prefer the fried dough to the heart-rending shrieks, but that's just me. I'm not sure what I would use here, but water so clear it seems to glow is kind of cool for the swamp and ties in with the idea of this magical glowing sea. A glowing dagger blade or anything that is glowing in a dim swamp would be interesting because it would stand out. And things that are tinkling together in the breeze, suggesting a wind blowing through the swamp, and there are wind chimes. So I'm kind of getting some sensory impressions of what you might see in a swampy area. The wind chimes, things that are glowing stand out, and the strangely clear water in some areas where it normally wouldn't be. Perhaps the heady aroma of wine. If the time grinding to a halt one applies to anything, it'd probably be that magical sea area we talked about earlier. They have suggestions about a small pet, such as a miniature giant space hamster. Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that one. We have the emergency gear, a fake ID. Okay, why would you need a fake ID around here? You might have breaking into that prison or transport nexus or whatever it is, someone who's sneaking in with a fake ID. Idea of a suspicious death, plenty of places to dispose of a body in a swamp. Could have something happen at a festival. So throwing together a bunch of these things, we can have some imagery of this swamp with glowing things, and some places of the swamp are uncanny and glowing or seem to have distorted time. There might be a tea house or a festival and a murder that takes place somewhere with strange shrieking and giggling, dark birds that are watching you in the swamp, people who are after some rare resource. I'm not sure what to do with any of this yet, but it's coming together as things that could appear in a scene or a prompt for conflict at some point. I'm not going to get into the glowy red, green, blue icons here, but these suggest a physical conflict of some sort to me because of the repeated sword icon. I'm going to go through one more set of cards here that I'm drawing from an Age of Sail themed set. These don't have the same icons on them, but they've got the same kind of information. We have a couple of phrases here that spell out decimate, new deity, gather, treacherous crime, detect, infinite parent. Well, going after a new deity suggests that you are having a religious schism, or maybe you're even going after a literal god. The second phrase could mean that you are hunting down criminals, or possibly even gathering them to help you in some way, a criminal band. Detect infinite parent, I don't know. This could tie in with the idea of searching for a god of some kind, or possibly hunting down the hero's origin since he's coming from another world. I'm thinking he's probably been born into this world and has been placed with an existing family. For icons, we have a tower suggesting a obstacle of some kind. We've got the sword again for direct conflict. For belongings, we have art supplies, treats, and espionage gear. That kind of ties in with the idea of a heist or a fake ID. Inaccurate maps, people who are being hunted down, followed in the street. Tenements, like a slum in the swamp, a museum, a workshop. Okay, I'm kind of imagining somebody who is traveling through a seedy area of this swamp town that is moving and visiting workshops and slums and trying to avoid being caught for crime or gathering a fake ID so he can break into this fortified area. I'm not sure yet what I do with this either, but this is another set of possible ideas to work with. Tying that in with the previous set of cards, we have similar imagery of like the glowing books or glowing blades and hunting down some kind of heretic or scientific villain or recovering a stolen treasure. So we have some idea of a physical conflict and a direct fight that involves a heist scenario of something like that, and stealing something, getting back a rare resource. So I've been through a couple of different RPG systems here, throwing in a bunch of dice and cards and looking through tables to throw together what are basically random prompts and seeing if I can generate something that has some internal logic to it that might help to set up a story based on what few assumptions I'm starting with. I'm a little surprised because we got this idea of a swamp with sort of a steampunk theme. The steampunk was kind of something that I imposed on it from the start, but I didn't know about the swamp particularly or the theocratic government or the strange creatures living in it. We have some idea that there is a resource crunch, a resource that is short. There is some religious heretic who's being hunted down possibly, or a suspicious killing recently. There is someone who might be sneaking into a place that has an important resource by getting a fake ID. To get that ID, he may need to hang out with seedy people. So is it going to be exactly how I write the story? No, probably not, but I've generated a lot of stuff here that could be cool and could make it into the story in some way, including a lot of random sensory prompts, like things that are wind chimes, or this glowing sea area, or a bird staring at you, or a glowing dagger in the dark. And I think some of that will probably show up in some fashion. I don't yet have a specific plot for the book, but this session has been helpful for throwing some ideas together, and it may inspire some of you as well to try playing around with the power of randomness. Start with any idea you may have and use either just random ideas or pulling together some RPG systems or similar things to throw some random ideas at the wall and see what sticks. Some of it will probably be junk to you or make no sense at all, but some of it might actually be pretty interesting and give you some ideas that may surprise you. I hope this session has been useful as a bit of insight into the creative process for doing things in a non-standard way, but it's not terribly different from what I would normally do if I weren't playing with cards and dice. I have some ideas and then try to throw together what might be cool in the setting or where there might be conflict or just images I might like to see, and then following some of the logic of what could happen from there. This has been a brainstorming session with a couple of different tools, including Godbound, the Game Master's Apprentice, and Mystic Empyrean, all of which I will link to below so you can buy them or download a free version. I hope this has been fun. It has been for me. Thanks. Bye.